I started the timer. Okay, today we are going to talk about Te Rua, the Feast of Te Rua. I'm going to talk about it in a way about it before. I'm not going to go into all the details because we'll do that at the ceremony. But I wanted to talk about basically just two verses. Uh, and I hope you like what I'm going to point out today. We're going to start off with Vayikra, which is Leviticus for the uninitiated, chapter 23, verse 24. And it says, Daber el bnei Yisrael lemor, bechodesh ha-shevi'i be'echad lachodesh yiyeh lachem Shabbaton Zikron Teruah Mikra Kodesh. And it's pretty straightforward, right? You guys understood all of that. And then I want to go ahead and read our next verse. It's going to be Shemot, which is Exodus for the uninitiated, chapter 19, verses 18 and 19. And they read, V'char Sinai Ashan Kulo Mi Pnei Asher Yarad Alive Yahweh Va'esh Va'esh Va'ya'al Ashano Ke'eshen HaKibeshan Va'yecherad Kol Hahar Ne'od Va'yehi Kol HaShafar Halech V'chazak Me'od Moshe. That's not even capitalized. Weird. Yedaber V'ha-Elohim Ya'anenu V'kol. I'm doing that for a reason. All right, so I'm going to move on to where I start talking about this Leviticus verse 23-24. It begins with dabar, which is to speak. It's setting in a row, ranging in order. It's to lead, to guide, especially to lead flocks or herds to pasture, to rule, to direct the people, to lead, to rule, also to bring into order, to subdue. About to start choking here. I better take me a drink. It says in the Gesenius, the much used and in the verb, the most frequent meaning to speak properly, to put words in order in the signification of connecting and saying. So you get what's going on here. I hope you're not just yammering on like I'm doing now. These are words that were arranged. They were purposely put in an order. You're purposely trying to lead, to guide somebody with your words, just like in the book did. You know, they put these words in a very specific order so that you could better understand what this word meant, right? Those So it's not just talking off the cuff. It's well thought out. It's written down. It's maybe rewritten, maybe updated here, maybe a comma added there. There's a lot of thought that has gone into this. El B'nai, so to the children, Yisrael. So you're not saying this to the church. You're not saying this to the Baptists, the Pentecostals, the whoever. You're not saying it to the Krishnas. You're not saying it to the Muslims. You're saying this to Yisrael. Lemor. It's to say, the primary signification is to bear forth, hence to bring it to light. So you've had to think this out. You've had to collect your thoughts. You've put all of your words together, whether in your mind or perhaps on parchment or lambskin or paper. Maybe you've chiseled it into a rock or burned it into wood, who knows. But now that you've done all of that, you're going to say these words out loud for the purpose of shedding light on this subject, for the purpose of making people see and perceive and understand. And all of that's just in the first couple of words. Bachodesh. Ba is just the bait being added to the word, which we would say in or with. Those are the two words you're going to use if you're translating. So chodesh is your word. And we say month in English. Say it in the month of, in English, we'll say it that way. Sometimes people say new moon. You see that a lot in Judaism, and you even see that from time to time in the English Bible itself. Because your month begins at the new moon, so it gets connected to the new moon. I tend to write new moon myself instead of just the word month. I think it falls short in my mind. Ha Shevi'i. So in the new month, somebody's going to get a Chevy, I guess. No, it's a Hebrew word for seven or seventh in the seventh month. Be'echad. Echad, that's that word, the one and the twisting and binding together to make strong and all that kind of stuff. But in this case, it's the way it's written in the way it's laid out in the sentence. It means in the first. So we've got the seventh new moon. And the first is going to be the first day of the new moon. It could be the first new moon of the year, right? We don't know yet. So let's see what it says after that. La Chodesh. Well, that's to the new moon or for the new moon, right? Yeh, it will be lachem. It will be to you. It will exist. It will. How do they say that in the English Bible? It will come to pass. That's actually okay. Ooh, it's weird sounding, but it's okay. Something's going to happen. Either it's going to happen, or maybe you're going to do it. But it's going to come to pass. You're going to do this because you're obedient, right? Shabbaton. So on this day, which I'll put together in a minute, whatever this day is, it's going to be a Sabbath in what's the dang word I'm looking for here? Plural. I don't know. The wrong perpetuity is the word that came out of my head because it actually has something to do with it, but that's not one. Once I got it in my head, I couldn't think of the right word. It's Sabbath in plural. Shabbaton. The Sabbath, Shabbat. But this says Shabbaton. So that one day in that particular month, the seventh month, is going to be a bunch of Sabbaths. Shabbaton. So you could say, well, that means it's a great Sabbath, because Chasinius says that. That's a dumb thing to say. I don't know who wrote that. I can't see what all it says. These boxes have leaned over so far, I don't even know what it says. Great Sabbath, a solemn Sabbath. You could say that too if you wanted to. They're not wrong, but it kind of falls short. Can I go back to the other screen? I can't even see my notes. It's from the root that is to rest, to keep a day of rest. The primary idea is that of to sit down, to sit still. It is used of men not laboring. of land which is not tilled, of travelers abstaining from their journey, of elders not sitting at the gate. All of those uh, ways that I just described are found in the Hebrew Bible. And if you're a Christian, in your Old Testament. It is to cease, to desist, to leave off, properly to desist from doing anything, to celebrate the Sabbath. Well, now how are you going to celebrate it if you cease to do it when you have ceased? Anyway, I get this way. You getting some idea here that maybe you're not supposed to work that day? And how can you have several of these in the same day? Well, here's your grammar rule. If it's written in the plural, this is a good example of this grammar rule. Because it's in the plural, it means that it goes on forever. This is a never ending thing. So it's in plural because there's going to be a whole bunch of them if you're going off into eternity with them. And that's why it's in plural. So you're not having a Trinitarian Sabbath. you know, how would you do that? You got the rest, the rest, the not working. What else could I put in there? Not well, no, that not really what I'm looking for. The rest, the not traveling, the abstaining. How's that for your Trinity Sabbath? Anyway, no, that's not what plurality in Hebrew is. And so people who try to do that because it says Elohim, which is God in plural, see, that proves that there's three gods. No, it does not. Plural is more than one. So how come you don't have two gods? Why do you have to have three? Just throwing that out there. Why don't you have 47? Why don't you have 100,000? Right? It's plural. It's not three. It has nothing to do with three. So, but this is plural because it does not end. And God is said in plural when speaking of the God because he has no beginning and he will never have an end. So he will always be God. He always has been God. He always will be God. You cannot say that in singular in Hebrew. It has to be said in plural. It has nothing to do with how many gods there are. There is only one. And he is not made up of three things. There is only one. God did not get a man's wife pregnant and the two, God and that woman now have a son together. No, that's mythology. That has nothing to do with the Bible. When that woman got pregnant, if you will, not really sure you could call it that since there was no anything that would have caused that physically. God was the child who was born. God was the child whose diaper had to be changed. God was a child who had to learn to walk. The child who went to school and learned to read and write. The child who went to college and became a rabbi and eventually did the things that he did to restore the covenant between himself and his people. Had nothing to do with Christianity. So there's only one God, and he's the one who did all of that. If he's not, then there's never been a Messiah. And that would make a whole lot of prophets a bunch of false prophets. That would be my, for all the Jews saying, wait, what? Yeah, if Yeshua is not God in the flesh, come as Messiah, then Daniel, Yirmiyahu, and Moshe himself are all false prophets. And you can't get around that. So you better find a way to reconcile it. I had to. But that doesn't make us Christian. We don't teach Christian theology. We teach the Bible, and that's all we teach. I get off in Talmud an awful lot. But I will admit, but it's all, what does it have to do with the Bible? It's all Bible. Anyway, so this is a time of rest, a time of ceasing something. And one of those somethings is going to be to cease your labor. Okay, so we go down to Zichron. It's a memory. It's to remember something. It's a memorial, a memento. A picture could be Zichron because you look at it and it brings a memory back. I mean, an object can bring a memory back. I know a woman who she had a whole stack of chairs and all of them were broken. Most of them just had three legs on it, and she wouldn't get rid of them because she remembered the day that Uncle Charlie sat in this particular chair and he made this joke. And, Cousin Sue sat in that chair and she did this and so did that. And she wouldn't get rid of any of that. She's a hoarder, but she kept those things because they reminded her of things. That was Zikron. That was her memorial. And this is a memorial. And what's it a memorial of? Te Rua. It's a memorial of noise, of a tumult. Tumult. I don't know how to say that word. Uh, Tumultuous. That it's the root of that word. It's of a loud noise, especially joyful noise, but it could be awful noise. It could be unjoyful noise. But most of the time, we're talking about a joyful noise, rejoicing, the sound of a whole group of people rejoicing and cheering, and like at a football game, 70,000 people up on their feet saying, "Yay!" Well, at least half of them. The other half are probably saying, "No." That's a lot of noise, right? It's joyful acclamation with which the people receive the king. So how loud should it be if you're receiving the King of Kings? I'm just saying. It's of a warlike cry, crying out in battle. Of course, back in the time of the biblical period, that would have been how do they do that? What's that sound? It was like saying E-L, 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 E-L. Better slow that down. I don't know. I'm probably not doing it right. But that was a noise that they made because when you got 3,000 or 5,000 or 10,000 people doing it, it is apparently a very scary sound. I can't imagine it because I've never heard it. When I do it by myself, I don't think that's scary at all. I think it's weird. But maybe with 10,000 people, it really would be scary. That was the idea anyway back then, is that it would scare people. I guess because when 10,000 people are making that noise, you realize there's a whole bunch of people coming over that hill. So that would be scary. Anyway, so that's what they mean by the battle cry, because it's noisy. The sound of a trumpet. In our case, since we're talking about Bible times, this is a shofar, right? The wacky dude you guys can see in the background. That thing. I'd blow it, but it would scare you. Just thought of that myself. I'll help myself out. All right, this is from the root ruah, to make a loud noise. All right, so it's a memory of making noise. And it goes on, mikra, that's a convocation, that's a calling together, that's to call together an assembly. Hence, an assembly called together, a sacred convocation called together, a place of holy convocation. The reciting and the reading of something publicly, that sort of a thing. And well, I say holy because the next word is kodesh, which is holy. It's what we're going to do tomorrow, right? Tomorrow evening at 7 p.m. We're going to have this holy convocation. We're going to call everybody together and we're going to have a ceremony. We're going to blow the horn. Somebody's going to blow the horn. If it's me, I do apologize in advance. If it's Daryl Lee, you'll love it. But we'll try to get that set up where he can do that. And because we've done it before, I don't remember off the top of my head how we did it, but somebody will figure that out, hopefully. But anyway, so we start off with the blowing of the horn, and because that's what we're supposed to be remembering. You get it? We're supposed to be remembering the loud noise, and well, I've kind of given it away telling you that's a horn because well, Te Rua noise, that's all that means. But it's connected to the idea of a horn. Why? Well, because even in battle, what did the Jews do? First thing they did was blow the horn, right? And if you're going to have a holy convocation, what did they do? Blow the horn. Everything was started with the blowing of the horn. If there was an ending convocation, they would start the convocation with the horn, and then when it was finally over, they would end it with the horns as well. So we're remembering the noise of the horns. That's why these days they call it the Feast of Trumpets, because now they play trumpets instead of shofarim. Some people do. I mean, most of the Jews still stick with the shofarim. That's the shofar, but in plural. I don't know. I guess you guys probably knew that. And then Kodesh, holiness. What is holy? A holy thing. A thing consecrated to God. That's the most important thing that we need to know about this word. A thing that is consecrated to God. It's of a sanctuary, because that's always consecrated to God, right? Used of the holy tabernacle and the temple, because they were literally how would I say that in English? Um, the tabernacle and the temple were set aside wholly and completely for the use of God. They, that is the place that all things God took place. You did not, when you went to the temple or the tabernacle, you didn't bring your wallet, you didn't bring your purse, you sure didn't bring your phone. They didn't have one back then, but so for the time travelers, they needed to leave their phones out in their spaceship or whatever it is they travel in, and or their phone booth. I don't know. Help myself out again. Where am I going with that? So, what other things are consecrated to God? Well, the clothing that I'm wearing right now, I only wear on a Sabbath or on a holy convocation. It has to be God connected for me to wear this stuff. If we use this horn, it has to be God connected because this has been consecrated to God. Over my shoulder, over there, that book, that scroll behind me in that box, consecrated to God. This building, this synagogue, consecrated to God. We try to do all things as unto God here. These things are consecrated to God. They're set apart for the work and the use of God and no other use. It's from the root, Kodesh is from the root that is to be pure and clean, properly used of physical purity and cleanliness. Hence, to be holy, sacred, used of things destined for holy worship. Uh, like a tabernacle. I think you get it. So we're calling together this holy convocation, this thing, the calling together of the assembly of the people is specifically because of God. It is for God, to God, of God, and about God. That's what this is supposed to be. All right, so here's my translation of this very long-winded journey into this very simple sentence. Speak to the children of Israel, saying, in the new moon of the seventh. I would have even written that, and it would have been absolutely correct translation. But since it didn't exactly say that, I didn't write it that way. Speak to the children of Israel, saying, in the new moon of the seventh month, in other words, on the first day of the seventh month, there will be to you Sabbaths. Of course, I wrote Shabbaton because Sabbaths is not a real word. This will never end. This will happen every single time you have the first day of the seventh month, right? You're always supposed to do this. There will be memorial celebrations every year on that same day, so it's in plural. Holy assemblies every day on the same day, every year on the same day, you'll have these holy assemblies. So it's all written in plural for that reason. Okay. So it's the memory, loud trumpet blowing. Well, when did that happen? Well, to know that, we go to Shemot chapter 19, and we're going to look at verses 18 and 19 in the time that we have left. I'm just going to read the translation here that I've written, then I'm going to talk about it. And Mount Sinai, some people know it as Sinai these days, but Sinai is the proper pronunciation. And Mount Sinai was completely covered with smoke because Yahweh descended upon it in Esh. And the smoke ascended as the smoke of a smelting furnace, and the whole mountain trembled greatly. The sound of the shofar was continuous and became extremely loud. And then Moshe spoke, and God answered him by a voice. As awesome as that is, that's not what the Hebrew said. It said something slightly different. Mount Sinai was completely covered with smoke because Yahweh descended. He came down and stood on it or sat on it or hovered just above it. I don't know what God did. It doesn't say. But he descended. He came down to be on top of this mountain. And it said he descended on it in Esh. Let me look at the Hebrew real quick. Or is that too far away? It's too far away. I would imagine it said Be'esh with Esh or in Esh. It doesn't matter. It's the same thing. Esh is that word that imitates the sound of the fire and the crackling. Esh. It doesn't do it justice, but it must have been pronounced maybe a little different back in the day because it imitated the sound of fire burning. And how exactly you do that, I don't know. You can kind of if you pour liquid on a pan that's hot, it'll make that sound that's kind of like that. So that's kind of what I imagine every time I do that. But honestly, the word is supposed to imitate the sound of a crackling fire. So I think there may have been some guttural thing that was done back then. Just what it is, I don't know. If I ever do hear the sound, I'm going to make the guy teach me how to do it because I think I would recognize it if I heard it. But some way they used to make a sound with their voice that sounded like a burning fire. That was how you used to pronounce that word. We just say Esh now because it's as close as we can get to it. Some words are like that. I mean, there were no recording of the way people spoke 5,000 years ago, so we get what we get, right? But this word Esh, when it's being spoken, you're talking about a fire in a fireplace or the forest is on fire or whatever. You're just talking about a fire. But the image behind it is that of lapping. It's of the fire consuming, but it's of that fire dancing. I mean, watch a fire burn in your fire pit or in a fireplace one night. You can just, that you've done it in your life. You know how you can become so mesmerized by it because you're watching the flames and it's as if this dance is going on, but at the same time it's destructive and it's it's literally destroying the whatever it's dancing on, right? So there is that on the negative side of Esh, you've got the all of that sort of thing, but it's of the dancing and the lapping of the fire, right? But when the grammar rule is that when it's being spoken of humans, or in this case, if you're speaking of God and you're using it as a human term, he ascended on it with fire. They're not saying that he came down and flames were going everywhere. That's not what's being said. When it's said of a person or said of God using anthropomorphic words, I think I said the right word. When you're comparing, you say the hand of God, the eyes of God are upon you. That's using human terms for God, and some people don't like that, especially in Judaism. They don't like using human terms of God because he's so way beyond being human, right? And I get that, but at some point we have to do that to explain certain things, and that's being done right here. And so it's saying that God descended on this thing with fire. Well, when we get to the human part of it, it changes from a physical fire to an emotional fire. It is of passion, of a burning, raging passion. It is uh, the kind of thing that you would expect of a married couple on their wedding night, the kind of thing you would expect uh, of two young lovers. The fire and the passion that tears them apart eventually, right? But it's of that initial thing, because this deep down something about what was going on that day. God was so passionate about it. It was like a raging fire in his soul. That's what's being said here. And it goes on, and the smoke ascended as the smoke of a smelting furnace. And they're actually using the word that's also used in Hebrew for a pyroclastic flow. It's of the heat that comes from hurricane, of a volcano. And when that pyroclastic flow comes over, it literally consumes everything and essentially makes it disappear. There's nothing left. All of the trees, every part of the trees, they're gone. Any human, any animal, anything that's there, they are vaporized. It's that kind of passion. And God's passion wasn't just boiling up in his inside him, in his emotion. His passion was boiling over in the form of smoke covering this place. That fiery passion that God was having on this day was boiling out of him and being seen by the people as smoke completely covering the top of this mountain where God was. And it says, and the whole mountain trembled greatly. And that's, what do you think? You're thinking earthquake, right? You're thinking that the thing is shaking. No doubt it was. But what they're actually saying here is that the mountain that had God touching it was trembling, not earthquaking. It was trembling at the presence of God. Even the mountain knew who was who had just descended upon it, and that mountain was worshiping God. That is, honestly, that's literally what they just said. That the mountain was just quivering at the presence of God. And then it goes on and says in verse 19, the sound of the shofar. Can you imagine what the shofar is like in heaven? We think of it in these terms, but they don't describe rams' horns in heaven. The animal type things that they describe in the Bible are vastly different. And those horns would probably be much larger. They would probably make much sweeter sounds. They would no doubt make much louder sounds. Uh, and the playing of these things, because you do have to know how to play them to get, if you're trying to make a song, you have to know how to make the notes change and all that kind of thing. Um, the timing would be absolutely impeccable, and the sound would be absolutely perfect pitch. The sound of the shofar, whatever that horn happened to be, because it's not just of a ram's horn, it's of a horn. It's of what the horn is actually made out of. Continues, or it was continuous. The sound of the shofar was continuous. It didn't stop. It wasn't a boo, boo, ooh, 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 ooh. Wasn't like that. It just did not stop. It went on. Now it could have had things like that going, but it did. Well, I don't know. It's hard to say. They were probably playing songs and all that kind of stuff, but there was no break in the sound. There was no breakdown. The trumpets in the shofarim, they would have been probably millions of them. We're not talking about just one here. The sound is going to be in singular, but the sound is coming from something that is plural. So it doesn't have to be written in the plural. It wouldn't be right to write it in the plural in Hebrew. They're going to write it in the singular. But the idea here is of this trumpet blast by probably millions of heavenly hosts playing perfectly pitched, perfectly on time, everybody playing their part and their part alone. There's no showboating. There's no lead guitar player trying to fill up every moment of the time with his fanciness. No, these people, this would have been very well put together. It would have been the most incredible sound you ever heard in your life, and it was continuous. It didn't stop. The music just kept going, and it became extremely loud, or you could say it became louder and louder. Either way would be a right translation. So we're not really sure if it was just that it was really, really loud, or if it just kept getting louder and louder. It's one or the other, or maybe both. We don't know. And then Moshe, you got to listen to this. And then Moshe spoke. Well, who the heck's going to hear him? And God, it says, answered. And in English, it always says him. No, that's not what the Hebrew says. It says, uh, I want to make sure I get the pronunciation that comes with this particular verse. I don't want to just say the root or something like that. Let me back up here for a second and get this. So I'm hoping to give you the full impact. Ya'anenu. Ya'anenu. You've heard me say the word lema'an. This is the root of that. So it's Yah is because he, speaking of God, uh, an, an. Yeah, it is masculine. We don't have to say he in this case, but you could. But do you hear new at the end? That's added to the word. It's not because the word ends in a noon. They've added a second noon, right? So do you guys know what happens when a word ends in new? Us. Moshe spoke, and God answered us. God answered us. It doesn't say God answered him. It says God answered us. By a voice. Why do we remember this loud, noisy event? Because God answered us. Te Rua is the moment in time every year when we remember that God answers us. And when God answers us, there's music from heaven, and it's loud, and it's continuous, and there's a burning passion of God that's flowing out of him, so much so you can't even see him. And when we speak to God, God answers us. This is what we have to remember. What was this event? This was the moment in time when God was consummating his marriage to his people. They didn't go the way God had hoped because everybody chickened out, ran off to the outskirts of town and said, "Ooh, don't talk to us, talk to Moshe." That's why they say him, because when you're reading the passage, you connect everything to, oh, well, it's Moshe. No, that's not what it says. It says us. Because, see, God was looking to enter into full-blown consummation that day. But because of our reaction, the marriage goes down a little bit different, doesn't it? We split it into two parts, Erisine and Nisoine. The proposal, or the engagement is what we call it these days, and then the consummation. But if you really want to get God excited, seems to me that you need to speak to God and let him answer us. I hope that gave you the goosebumps the way it gave me the goosebumps. Because, see, with Moshe, he was the picture of things to come. He was, if you will, the mini Messiah. And Judaism has had a problem with this for so long. There is no form of the word Moshe in the Coptic language. Never has been. So no, his name did not mean drawn out in Coptic. In the, I want to say Greek. They weren't Greek. One of those guys with the funny hats on. Egyptian. There is no form of Moshe in the Egyptian language. Anyone that tells you so has read a bunch of nonsense or making it up. I don't know. It's not there. But there is a form of Moshe in the Hebrew language, and it comes from Moshiach, not Ak, Moshiach. Yeah, Messiah. But he is the image of Messiah. He was the forerunner of the real Messiah. So he's like a mini Messiah, right? And what did that mini Messiah do? He brought the law to the people, and he brought the people to the law. And he attempted one day to consummate that coming together of the people and the law, which was the marriage covenant between those people and their groom. He tried real hard to make it happen, but they chickened out. So we have the image of what was supposed to happen and the reality of what did happen. But we see that in that image, God answered all of us, not just the prophet. And what we were supposed to understand from that was that when Mashiach came, and he came, otherwise Daniel was a bald-faced, lying false prophet, as was Yirmiyahu, because they gave the actual dates. Rip them out of your Bible right now. Got enough strength to do that? Come on, do it. You're not going to do it because you know they're not false prophets, don't you? So if they're not false prophets, who are they? Men of God, prophets of God, who were given the key to know when Mashiach would come. And Mashiach did, in fact, do that. The Mashiach being God, because God said himself out of his own mouth. And you know that everything that God says is perfect, holy, and pure. He said, I am Yahweh, and other than me, there is no salvation. That single sentence in Isaiah proves beyond any shadow of a doubt that if there is a Mashiach, born of a woman, living in human flesh, then that is Emmanuel. That is God with us. Not Ben Emmanuel, the Son of God with us. It is Emmanuel. Just like the prophet said. And he'll be called Wonderful, Counselor, Prince of Peace, Almighty God. Of course he will. And he's going to show up at the very moment that Daniel said he would. At the very moment that Yirmiyahu said he would. Just like Moshe said he would. These men were not false prophets. If they are, our entire Hebrew Bible is filled with false prophets because they all pointed to Mashiach. All of them. So Mashiach came, and it was God. Not the Son of God. It was God, and he was the Son. And why did he do that? So he could talk to us, not to Moshe. And once he came, and he laid down that sin sacrifice, and said, Nishlam, it is finished. In other words, the document has now been signed. Yisrael now belongs to God. Yisrael is now God's bride. And if we, being Yisrael, because we are obedient to God's law, not because of we were born of some nonsensical bloodline, and that bothers me about Judaism. Nobody has Moshe's DNA. Nobody. No. Nobody has it. So what you're comparing it to is some dude that walked up and said, I'm a Levite. Oh, right. Let's take your blood. We'll compare everybody else to that. Come on. Science can't do that. Not until they find Moshe's body. Just saying. Just throwing that out there. So there is no DNA evidence that proves anything. And how is it that you can have Jews that are white-skinned like me and Jews that are olive-skinned like my grandmother or brown-skinned like my other grandmother? My grandmother on my dad's side was really brown. And then how can you have Jews that are 6'4" and above like most of my uncles, and then Jews that are 4 foot nothing like my grandfather on my dad's side? Boy, he was a little bitty guy. How can you have Jews that are black, Jews that are Hispanic, Jews that are Spaniards, Jews that are, like my granddad on my dad's side was like Norwegian or something like that? I mean, he was white as a ghost. Thus, why I'm not brown like my grandmother on my mother's side. My mother was white as a ghost, just like her daddy, and I'm kind of like that too. It's not about the bloodline. It never was about the bloodline. It will never be about the bloodline. It's about whether you live according to God's law or not. That's what makes you Yehudi. Just think it out. Yehudi. Where do we get that? Yehud. What is that? That's a compound of two words. The first one is God's name. That's where we get the Yeh from Yahweh. The shortened version being Yah. Yeh. Hud is your next word. Imitator, impersonator, follower, worshiper. It indicates somebody who does, a man or a woman who does what God did. What did God do? He lived by the Torah. The Torah is God's lifestyle. And so when we make God's lifestyle our lifestyle, and we live according to that law, it makes no difference what race we came from, what color we are, what continent we were born on, or what continent our great grandfather was born on. None of that matters. Because if you're a Jew, it's because you follow God's law. If you're not following God's law, you're not actually a Jew. So don't go around telling people they're not Jewish because they weren't born into a Jewish family like you were, if you're not living by the law, because you're the problem, not them. I hate it when people do that. But Moshe was the image of things to come. And when Moshiach came, when Yahweh came and consummated the marriage, now Yahweh speaks to us. And this is what we remember on this very wonderful celebration. That celebration that brings up God's passion so extreme that it's loud, it's noisy, and it is passion-filled. I'll see you guys Sunday night. Is that right? 7 p.m. Shalom v'shalom.
Blessing Be'ivrit. Yevarecha Yahweh v'yish merecha. Ya'er Yahweh panai v'lecha v'hunecha. Yisa Yahweh panai v'lecha v'yasim lecha shalom. And in English, may Yahweh cause you to lie down so that you may rest. May he caress you. May he prepare you for what is ahead. May he watch over you. May he keep you from harm. May he cause goodness to grow in you and take away the bad. May he arrange your life and cause you to flourish. May he cheer you up and gladden your heart. May he cause his light to shine through you. May he show you tenderness and favor and love in his presence. May he show you kindness and be delicate towards you. May he show you his generosity, mercy, compassion, and desire for you as it comes forth from the depths of his soul. May he lift you out of your pit and deliver you from the things that hold you prisoner. May he draw you to his chest and cast his eyes on yours. May he show you his love and desire for you as he cradles you in his arms. May he bear your punishment and pardon you of your sin. May he take you for his bride. May he establish a foundation in you. May he place his name on your heart and mind and make your body his temple. May you be his treasure. May you always be on his mind. May he draw you near and comfort you when you are afraid. May he assure you there is nothing to fear because he is with you. May you and all that concerns you be at peace because he is your friend. Amen.